Every story we tell is a journey, a thrilling adventure that will keep you hooked from start to finish. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing our community come together from all around the world. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Tomorrow, we have a special story just for you. Trust us, you won't want to miss it. See you on the next adventure. The one time a royal guard broke his stillness, and it was perfect. It was a beautiful summer afternoon at Buckingham Palace. The golden sunlight gleamed off the black iron gates as a steady stream of tourists gathered, eager to witness the legendary royal guard standing motionless in their striking red uniforms and tall bearskin hats. Among the crowd was Oliver, a 5-year-old boy visiting London for the first time with his parents. He clutched his father's hand tightly, his eyes sparkling with excitement as he gazed up at the stoic soldiers before him. Oliver had always been fascinated by soldiers. His room back home was filled with toy soldiers, books about knights, and posters of historical warriors. But nothing compared to seeing real-life guards in action, standing tall, unshaken, as if they were made of stone. He tugged on his father's sleeve, his little voice filled with wonder. "Dad, are they real soldiers?" His father smiled, nodding. "Yes, they are. They're not just standing there for show. They're highly trained, and their job is to protect the royal family." Oliver's mouth fell open. Protecting the royal family? That sounded like the most important job in the world. Without hesitation, he let go of his father's hand, took a few steps forward, and stood as straight as he could, mimicking the rigid posture of the guards. His tiny chest puffed out. His arms were locked stiff at his sides. His feet planted firmly on the ground. For a moment, he was no longer just a little boy. He was a soldier. Nearby tourists noticed the adorable scene and chuckled softly, some pulling out their phones to capture the moment. "He's really into it," one woman said, nudging her friend as she began recording. Oliver, fully committed to his role, then lifted his right hand to his forehead, giving the best salute his tiny arms could manage. The royal guard beside him, of course, remained completely still, his gaze locked straight ahead, showing no sign of acknowledgement. But Oliver didn't seem to mind. To him, just standing there, acting like a real soldier, was the most exciting thing ever. Little did he know, something extraordinary was about to happen. Oliver stood proudly, his tiny body stiff as a board, mirroring the unshakable discipline of the royal guard beside him. His parents chuckled softly, watching their son take his new role very seriously. But Oliver wasn't playing. To him, this was a mission. The greatest test of discipline he had ever faced. He glanced up at the towering soldier next to him, observing every detail, the way his shoulders squared perfectly, how his chin was lifted just slightly, how his hands rested firmly on his rifle without a single twitch. Oliver inhaled deeply and tried to do the same. His little hands balled into fists, mimicking the soldier's strong grip. His feet were planted firmly on the ground, but his legs began to shake slightly from the effort. Still, he refused to break his stance. A few tourists began to take notice. They nudged each other, pointing at the determined little boy. Phones were raised as cameras started rolling. "Look at him," a woman whispered, smiling. "He's really trying to be one of them." Oliver lifted his right hand again and saluted once more, his face serious and focused. A few people in the crowd let out quiet chuckles, charmed by his determination. But no matter what happened around him, Oliver stayed committed to his mission. He was going to stand just as still as the real royal guard. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. His small chest rose and fell in steady breaths. But then, his nose started to itch. Oliver's eyes widened. Uh-oh. He squeezed his hands into fists, trying to will away the urge to scratch. He could feel the tickle growing stronger, but he didn't want to break his perfect stance. He glanced up at the soldier again, completely motionless. If the royal guard could ignore every distraction, so could he. Determined, he kept his hands locked by his sides, fighting against the unbearable itch. The tourists around him giggled softly, noticing his struggle. But then, Oliver lost his balance. His foot slipped ever so slightly, and his small body tilted forward. For a moment, it looked like he might topple straight onto the ground. And that's when something unexpected happened. Oliver's tiny frame wobbled as he fought to keep his balance. The itch on his nose had been distracting enough, but now, as he shifted his weight just a little too far forward, he felt himself tilting. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Oh no," someone whispered. A woman instinctively reached out, though she was too far away to catch him. Oliver's parents froze in place, their faces suddenly filled with concern. For a moment, it looked like he was going to fall face first onto the pavement, right in front of the motionless royal guard. But then, something completely unexpected happened. In one swift, almost imperceptible movement, the royal guard shifted his foot slightly forward, just enough to block Oliver's fall. It was a motion so small and controlled that many people in the crowd barely noticed. But Oliver did. The instant his little foot made contact with the soldier's sturdy black boot, he regained his balance. His arms flailed for a split second before he straightened up again, blinking in surprise. The crowd erupted in murmurs. "Did you see that?" a man whispered to his wife. "The guard moved," another person said in disbelief. The royal guards were known for their unyielding discipline, their ability to stand still no matter what was happening around them. But today, in this rare moment, one of them had broken that stillness, not for a tourist's amusement, not because he had to, but because a little boy needed him to. The movement had been so calm, so precise, that it almost looked like it never happened. The guard immediately returned to his perfect stance, eyes locked straight ahead, posture rigid as ever. But now, the energy in the crowd had shifted. People whispered excitedly to one another. Some reviewed their phone recordings, zooming in to see if they had caught the guard's rare reaction. Oliver, meanwhile, just stood there, blinking up at the soldier in awe. Had he really done that? Had this real-life soldier, one of the most disciplined men he had ever seen, actually moved to help him? Oliver's little heart swelled with something he couldn't quite describe. Maybe it was admiration. Maybe it was gratitude. Or maybe it was the simple but powerful realization that even the strongest, most disciplined people in the world can still be kind. Either way, he wasn't going to forget this moment anytime soon. For a few long seconds, the world seemed to pause. The royal guard stood motionless, just as he always had. Oliver, now balanced again, stared up at the towering soldier, his tiny chest rising and falling as he tried to process what had just happened. Had the guard really moved? Had he just broken protocol, even in the smallest way, to help him? The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. "I can't believe it," a man said, scrolling back through his phone recording. "I swear he shifted his foot," another tourist whispered. Oliver's parents exchanged a look. They knew how strict the royal guards were. They knew these men were trained not to react, no matter how many tourists made faces, danced, or tried to provoke them. And yet, one had just moved for their son. It had been so subtle, so quick, but it had meant everything. Then, something even more incredible happened. For just a fraction of a second, the royal guard's eyes shifted downward ever so slightly, just enough to meet Oliver's gaze. It wasn't a big reaction. It wasn't dramatic. But it was there. A silent acknowledgement. A quiet moment of understanding between a disciplined soldier and a little boy who just wanted to be like him. Oliver's breath caught in his throat. For the first time all day, he broke his stance, lowering his hand from his salute. His lips curled into a small but genuine smile. And then, just as quickly as it had happened, the guard's gaze returned straight ahead, and his stance was once again unshakable. As if nothing had ever happened. The tourists who had been lucky enough to witness it gasped softly. They had just seen something extraordinary. A rare, fleeting moment where discipline met humanity. The murmurs in the crowd turned to respectful silence. Oliver didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Instead, he took a step back, looking at the soldier one last time before standing at attention and giving one final salute. This time, not as a game. Not as a joke. But as a real gesture of respect. And as the sun shone down on Buckingham Palace, Oliver turned to his parents, his young heart filled with something he hadn't felt before. A deep admiration for those who serve. The moment had passed, but its impact would last forever. Oliver stepped back toward his parents, his little feet moving carefully, as if he didn't want to disturb the powerful silence that had settled over the crowd. His heart still pounded in his chest, not from excitement, but from something deeper. Something he didn't quite have words for yet. He looked up at his father, who smiled down at him, eyes filled with pride. "You did great, buddy," his dad whispered, ruffling his hair. Oliver didn't answer right away. He was still thinking about what had just happened. The royal guard hadn't spoken a single word. Hadn't smiled. Hadn't broken character. And yet, with just the smallest movement, he had told Oliver everything he needed to know. That strength wasn't just about standing tall and looking tough. That discipline didn't mean you had to shut out the world completely. And that sometimes, even the most unshakable figures in history still knew when to bend, just a little, for the right reasons. The murmurs in the crowd slowly began to rise again. Tourists were still buzzing about what they had just seen, scrolling through their phone recordings, replaying the moment over and over. "Did you see that?" one man asked his wife. "I can't believe it," another woman whispered. "That was incredible." The royal guard, of course, had already returned to his rigid stance, as if nothing had ever happened. To most people, he was once again just a silent, unmovable soldier. But Oliver knew better now. As his parents guided him back toward the rest of the tour group, he turned for one last look. The sun gleamed off the soldier's tall bearskin hat, his polished black boots reflecting the light. Oliver lifted his right hand one final time, giving the best, most disciplined salute he had ever done. And though the guard didn't move again, Oliver felt something change inside him. A newfound respect. A deeper understanding. And a moment he would remember for the rest of his life. Because sometimes, the greatest lessons aren't taught through words, but through action. This rare moment showed that even the most disciplined soldiers still carry a heart full of honor and humanity. What do you think? Do you believe strict military rules should always be followed? Or are there moments like this when a small gesture of kindness is more important than protocol? Let us know in the comments below. And if you loved this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible real-life moments that prove humanity and discipline can go hand in hand.